We're living in an increasingly digital world, and this has been a thing even way before the dreaded year of 2020 kicks in. A lot of communications are done through social media, and Twitter is a very popular one. It's not just a very popular social media to share all your thoughts of the day, but it's also a very popular social media to do all sorts of things that can significantly and a lot of times negatively impact people's lives. Twitter is one of the many proofs that the pen is mightier than the sword, or I guess you can say that the tweets are mightier than the sword. But what if I tell you that the digital world that we're living in does not represent the actual world that people are living in? What if I tell you that this digital world is merely represented by those who are more active participating in the world rather than the actual humanity itself? What if I tell you that the digital world has distorted you and your perception of reality? What if I tell you that we're living in a rather messed up persona universe complete with phantom thief larpers and an unknown godlike entity hiding behind the universe that are probably threatening to destroy the world that we know and love? Okay, that seems a bit hyperbolic, but I want to go back to the idea of digital distortion, because here's the thing. Social media is one of the means of communicating with one another, and yes, there are definitely real people using it, but they don't exactly represent the opinions of the overall population. The opinions of people who are using the internet frequently doesn't necessarily represent the opinions of people who don't use the internet frequently. So a hipster from the city who is online 24/7 might have different opinions about the current state of affairs compared to, say, a farmer in the countryside who only gets online occasionally. Now that seems like a reasonable assumption, of course, but as I said before, social media is dominated by the people who are more active in the platform rather than the people who are actually in the platform. I'm going to refer to these people as squeakers, which is an apt word to describe angry squealing children in online games, but I would like to extend that definition to angry squealing everybody else in social media, one whose tweets got so much more attention and statistics than a missing person announcement. And just like the previous definition of a squeaker, these brand new next generation squeakers are loud, annoying, and shows about an equal amount of maturity. These brand new squeakers are all of those traits combined with their insane obsession with social media. If I tell you right now to flex the amount of time you spent on a video game, imagine spending that amount of time on social media, except multiplied 1,000-fold to the point where they might as well surgically attach their phones to their hands. Now imagine a universe where social media is dominated by these people's opinions. Imagine a universe where a lot of the aspects in our life, such as culture, entertainment, social issues, norms, etc., are controlled by these very obsessive and addictive social media users. Actually, you don't have to imagine it, you're living in it right now. Allow me to show you some not so old Twitter statistics that will highlight precisely why this culture war is rigged, and the only people who win them are the squeakers who, if this was an anime, is a yandere who uses Twitter instead of Axis. In Twitter, there are about 330 monthly active users and 145 billion daily users. A total of 1.3 billion accounts have been created, but 44% made an account and left before ever sending a tweet. But that's not the most important bit. The most important bit here is that based on the US accounts, 10% of users write 80% of the tweets. That's right, a great portion of tweets are made by only a small portion of the total user base. This means that the most significant opinions that people are going to be hearing from are the opinions of people who are shouting the most. It's the old proverb of the squeaky wheel getting the grease, except the squeaky wheel might not actually need the grease and they're squeaking because they're addicted to that sort of thing. And with this increasingly more digital and more isolated world that we're living in, a lot of people are going to be using social media as one of the primary means of communication. Some of those people will include corporations. Corporations are unfortunately not in tune with the opinions of the average consumers, which is one of the primary reasons why they tend to make some downright foolish and out of touch business and PR decisions. One of the signs in why they're so out of touch is that they're going to make products to appeal to the aforementioned squeakers and social media addicts rather than the rest of the consumers who actually enjoy those products. And with that, we can now finally talk about how this level of digital distortion contributes very heavily in how a lot of aspects in our life, including entertainment, has shifted into catering towards a rather arbitrary and inconsistent standard. Let's focus specifically on the entertainment industry. Why do we have a lot of companies in the entertainment industry trying so hard to appeal to the loud, squeaking minorities who might or might not have been the consumers of their product, rather than the actual consumers of their product? There are many factors that contribute to this, and one of which I have discussed earlier. Social media has successfully successfully distorted people's perception of reality and people's perception of what people think of a certain subject. Nobody is immune to this. I'm vulnerable to this. You're vulnerable to this. We are vulnerable to this. Social media can shape our perception into thinking that people think a certain way when in reality they don't. Finding out the actual truth in what people actually think is going to be difficult, but with the abundance of lies, deception, misdirection, and fake news surrounding the World Wide Web. The biggest reason why it's difficult is because, as I said before, social media doesn't represent the people in the real world. Social media represents the people who are most active on it. Social media represents the people who are getting the most statistics. Our perception towards people's messages and opinions are being distorted by social media addicts who are willing to sacrifice their entire livelihood just to gain statistics, recognition, or, going back to the earlier proverb, the grease for their squeaky wheels. For example, most normal people are going to be on the opinion that there's nothing wrong with video game characters that look appealing, but you could have been fooled into thinking that's not the case when the squeakers out there are complaining about it 24/7. And thanks to their loudness and squeakiness, these people are able to win a lot of companies over. Now, this wouldn't affect companies who already have people that agree with those people in the first place. It wouldn't affect companies that have already gone into the woke side because they have already been affected by it. But this would definitely affect companies or even individuals that haven't gone into the woke side. This would affect their perception into thinking that the opinions of social media addicts represent the opinions of everyone. This would affect their perception into thinking that the most insane, most obsessive, most heavily addicted social media junkies are representing the opinions of the people who are actually enjoying their content, which are probably not as active in social media as those people. This concern has gone pretty much into the international level, with a lot of Japanese creators expressing their concerns in how future entertainment will be regulated to appeal to foreign standards. I definitely understand their concerns. As a creator myself, I would want my works to be dictated by those social media junkies. But unfortunately, a lot of creators, especially foreign ones, aren't very familiar with how social media works, especially English social media. They're going to naively think that the people in social media represent the majority of opinions, rather than the people who are most active on it. And with that particular mindset, they're going to change or modify their creations in order to not cause further offense towards these foreigners, even though the offense in this case is towards minor transgressions like characters that are cursed with such attractive bodies. So do you see what I'm getting at here? I already talked about my opinions on the fandom police, and the pattern is pretty much the same. Somebody created a content that offends people, those people tell the creator to delete said content, the creator either deleted it or move on with their lives ignoring the haters. To those creators who are able to bravely stand their ground and reject these social media junkies, I commend your bravery, but to those artists who couldn't, I understand, and I do realize that you have good intentions, but you have made a mistake. You are merely reinforcing their behaviors and encouraging them more and more into thinking that squeaking as loud as possible would get them the grease. You're not doing anything wrong, you're just doing what they say is wrong. But the thing about those squeakers is that they never change. Whatever things we tell them, they're always gonna be the same. They're always gonna stay consistent with their behavior, and there's never gonna be a point in which any of these people realize that what they're doing is harmful and toxic to everyone around. That actually brings me to another conversation that pretty much explains why these social media junkies act as part of the fandom police. These people are squeakers and junkies who got addicted by social media. It's pretty much part of their life and they cannot live without it. So if there's something that slightly bothers them, they would be incredibly furious about it. These people have made their social media as a part of their bloodstream, so much so that if there's a clot on it that interrupts its flow, they're gonna find a way to remove it. But unfortunately, that bloodstream is merely a metaphor. In reality, it's just your average social media, and these people have the choice to mute or block people, but because social media is part of their life, because social media is their blood, they can't just mute or block people. They have to make sure that these perceived parasites get removed from their stream, or they wouldn't be able to browse normally. But of course, they can't just demand somebody else to be removed, so they make up excuses. They hide behind the guise of morality. They mask their intentions of removing other people's work by saying that it's for the safety of everyone on the internet, or so that people don't get influenced to become perverts or kid fiddlers. Hiding behind the guises of morality is a very good way to not just mask your intentions, but to also manipulate your average people into thinking that you're doing something good for the world, when in reality you're just trying to remove something that personally bothers you by harming the people who made them in the process. Unfortunately, these people have absolutely no shred of empathy. These people do not realize that a lot of these moralistic accusations that they throw towards these creators are harming their reputation. a lot of these buzzwords that describe how discriminatory they are towards people for certain characteristics, or buzzwords that describe how they have a monstrous desire to harm children, are actually hurting reputation of these innocent people who have no intentions in doing so and are not any of those things. But these social media junkies don't care. All they care about is for those people to not bother them in some way. And that, my friend, is pretty much how a lot of social media hooplas and controversies work, which is a terrible shame because there are a lot of social media hooplas and controversies that are actually justified and a lot of people need to pay more attention to. Cancel culture is a weapon that was unfortunately mostly used for petty things like the person saying a naughty word in the past instead of actually serious things like people harming or manipulating women or children, either physically or mentally. The people who most often abuse this weapon for petty, selfish, and stupid reasons are the aforementioned social media addicts, and unfortunately they have way too much power for people to listen to them. And here's where I'm going to deliver the bad news to a lot of people. There's nothing you can do to stop them. I can tell you one way that you can stop it, but at that point, the sacrifice would be too much, and you would never ever gain any sort of victory against these people. As I said before, a lot of the petty and pointless hooplas tend to be done by the social media addicts and junkies and people who love to squeak the most. The only way for you to beat them is to beat them by their own game, as in beat them with better statistics. I mean, these people are only a small minority at the end of the day. If the rest of the majority decides to speak up, we can easily trump them. And you are correct, the silent majority would definitely win against the loud minority if they all speak out, but there's a reason why we call them the silent majority. Going back to the Twitter statistics that I mentioned, the English-speaking Twitter, or social media in general, is mostly centered on Americans. I mean, I wouldn't have a majority American audiences otherwise. However, the amount of people who have a social media account in the US, for example, are very little compared to the total population. 22% of US adults to be exact. Combine that with a 10% statistics and we got like, what, 2.2% of adults? Not exactly representative of the general population, is it? So how do you beat these insane, crazily devoted, and incredibly addicted social media junkies? Well, you beat them by becoming them. No, really, these people win over a lot of companies and a lot of people through social media statistics. You can't just win by being right. You also have to win by being the most noticeable. You also have to win by being as equally, if not more active and devoted as these aforementioned social media junkies. And that's precisely why I said that this sort of thing requires a great sacrifice. That sacrifice is your sanity. These social media junkies have nothing else to do with their lives. You too also need to have literally nothing else to do in your life. You too also have to make social media your lifeblood and make it as if you cannot live without it. Unfortunately, most of you have an actual real life to deal with. Most of you aren't sitting in the ivory towers and complaining about the pettiest of things in your life. The reason why these people get away with it is because you are too busy dealing with your real life stuff, and rightfully so. And that, my friend, is way too great of a sacrifice for pretty much a lot of people, because normal people have other things to do. Normal people have jobs. Normal people have families and friends in real life. Normal people have video games to play, animes to watch, mangas to read, literally anything else in their life that does not revolve around social media. Normal people just couldn't be bothered to spend a little bit of their time talking in social media and bringing some form of sanity into it. The reason why people perceive that social media is filled with the insane and the crazy people is because the normal people who are in it don't use it as much. And that may or may not include you. Yes, you. I'm not just talking about the normies here. I'm also talking about people who don't use Twitter, which is a good portion of my audiences on YouTube. And even for those who use Twitter, I can guarantee you that none of you guys are using it as obsessively as these lunatics do. Even though the absolute best way for you to counter these people is to be there on social media and actually counter these people. But even if you do all of that, no matter how frequent or addicted you are in that social media, there are always going to be people who are even more frequent and addicted than you. Those people have a significant control over your social media and you cannot stop them. So there you go. If you want to win this culture war, you have to be just as crazily devoted and insane as these social media junkies. And doing so would require you to sacrifice a significant portion of your life that I would recommend you to actually spend on. And even if you are dedicated educated enough to be just as crazy as them, the playing field is not even a fair one. It's been proven time and time again that a lot of the big tech websites are biased towards certain opinions. They're going to promote those opinions, and if you dare to disagree or attempt to challenge those viewpoints, they're going to shadow ban you at best or ban you entirely at worst. Even if you sacrifice all of your sanity and your livelihood for the sake of fighting these social media junkies, you're still gonna face the reality that these social media playing field are rigged into their favor. So to put it simply, you're going to lose, no matter what. We are not in an environment where we are capable of winning. We are in an environment where the best thing that we can do is to survive. The best thing that we can do is to improve ourselves and learn how to make sure that you don't get yourself in trouble with any of these lunatics or have these lunatics to drag you down to their level. Keep in mind that there's nothing wrong with criticizing them or mocking them. In fact, I highly encourage people for doing so. I highly encourage people to criticize and mock these people and expose the flaws of their thinking to the people who are unaware of it. There is, however, something wrong with thinking that these people can change or that you will somehow win the fight, because you won't. There's too much sacrifice to be made, and the game is pretty much rigged. In conclusion, this digital world that we're living in is definitely a good way to communicate with one another, but it is not a good representation of reality. It is merely a small and narrow window that gives you so little information that it could possibly mislead you into thinking something else. It's filled with the messages from the loudest of mouths, from the tiniest of minorities, those who are obsessed and addicted by statistics, those who are powerful enough to determine the standards and the norms of our society with only a couple of texts. And unfortunately, there's no way for you to fix this problem. Not only that it will require a great sacrifice of your sanity, but the game is rigged against your favor. The best and the only thing that you can do right now is to focus on yourself and survive, and occasionally mock these people and expose them on how dumb they are.